The colony ship Starbound Hope moved slowly through the darkness of space toward Vega Station. Inside its silver halls, 37 children pressed their faces against the viewing windows. Their eyes were wide with wonder as the massive station came into view. It was shaped like a spinning wheel, with lights glowing from thousands of windows. This was the heart of galactic trade, a place where dozens of alien species met to exchange goods and ideas. Commander Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge and watched the approach carefully. He had made this journey many times before, but today felt different. Today he carried precious cargo. These children represented humanity's hope for peaceful relations with the galaxy. They were students from the New Denver Educational Initiative, traveling to participate in a cultural exchange program that had taken 3 years to organize. Dr. Catherine Palmer walked among the children, checking that everyone had their identification badges and translation devices. She was a tall woman with kind eyes and gray hair that she kept tied back in a simple bun. For 20 years, she had worked to build bridges between humans and other species. This program was her greatest achievement. "Are you excited, Lucas?" she asked a 12-year-old boy who stood apart from the others. Lucas Bennett nodded, but his expression was serious for a child his age. "My father said this trip is important. He said we are ambassadors." "Your father is right," Catherine replied with a warm smile. She knew that Lucas carried a heavy weight on his young shoulders. His father was Admiral Christopher Bennett, one of the most respected military leaders on Earth. Lucas felt he needed to be perfect to honor his family name. Beside Lucas stood his younger sister Emma. She was only 9 years old, with curly brown hair and a gap-toothed smile. Unlike her brother, Emma showed no sign of worry. She bounced on her feet and pointed at every new sight outside the windows. "Look, Lucas, those ships are so strange. They look like fish." Lucas allowed himself a small smile. "Those are Thesan vessels. They live in water on their home planets, so they design their ships to look like sea creatures." The Starbound Hope docked smoothly at the station. Commander Hayes announced their arrival over the speakers and wished the children good luck. Catherine gathered her students and led them through the airlock into Vega Station. The interior of the station was overwhelming. Aliens of every shape and size moved through the corridors. Some walked on 2 legs like humans. Others floated through the air or crawled along the walls. The smell was strange, a mixture of unfamiliar foods and atmospheres from distant worlds. The children stayed close together, holding hands and staring at everything around them. A tall alien with blue skin and 4 arms approached them. This was their host, a member of the Eldari species. The Eldari had always been friendly toward humanity, and this one greeted Catherine with what passed for a smile on his unusual face. "Welcome to Vega Station, Dr. Palmer. The exchange hall is prepared for your students. Several delegations are eager to meet them." Catherine thanked him and led the children forward. They entered a large circular room filled with comfortable seating and interactive displays. Representatives from 6 different species waited to greet them. The children spread out, their initial fear giving way to curiosity. Soon they were laughing and trying to communicate with young aliens their own age. Lucas found himself talking to a Thesan child about Earth's oceans. Emma was showing a group of small furry aliens how to play a clapping game. Catherine watched with pride swelling in her chest. This was exactly what she had hoped for. Children did not care about politics or territory. They only wanted to play and learn and make friends. But not everyone on Vega Station shared this innocent view. In a dark corner of the station, Councillor Tharketh of the Varath watched the scene through security cameras. He was a tall reptilian creature with scales the color of dried blood and eyes that held no warmth. The Varath had opposed human expansion for decades. They saw humanity as a threat, a species that bred too quickly and spread too far across the galaxy. Tharketh, had tried to stop this exchange program through political means. He had argued in the Galactic Council the humans were dangerous, that their children carried diseases harmful to other species. The Council had dismissed his concerns. Now he decided to take matters into his own hands. He turned to his security commander. Initiate containment protocol. Claim the human children are infected with a Class 3 pathogen. Remove them from the exchange hall immediately. The commander hesitated. Counselor, there is no evidence of any infection. The humans passed all medical screenings. Darketh's eyes narrowed. I am not asking for evidence. I am giving you an order. The children will be detained. Earth will be forced to negotiate on our terms if they want them back. This is how we end human expansion once and for all. The commander bowed his head and left to carry out the order. In the exchange hall, the children had no warning. One moment they were laughing and playing. The next moment, the doors burst open and Varus soldiers poured into the room. They wore heavy armor and carried weapons that glowed with blue energy. Catherine stepped forward with her hands raised. What is the meaning of this? These children are under diplomatic protection. A Varus officer pushed her aside. The humans are infected. They must be contained for the safety of the station. That is a lie. Catherine shouted. We passed every medical test. The officer ignored her. He raised his weapon and pointed it at the crowd of terrified children. Comply or be subdued. The children did not understand what was happening. Some began to cry. Others tried to run. The Varus soldiers activated their neural disruptors and fired into the group without mercy. Lucas threw himself over his sister as blue lightning filled the air. He felt the shock hit his back and screamed in pain. All around him, children fell to the ground, their small bodies convulsing from the weapons designed to incapacitate adult prisoners. When the silence finally came, 17 children lay injured on the floor. 3 of them, including young Emma Bennett, were not moving at all. Catherine crawled toward Emma and pressed her fingers to the girl's neck. She found a pulse, but it was weak and unsteady. Tears streamed down her face as she looked up at the Varus soldiers. What have you done? She whispered. She is just a child. They are all just children. The soldiers did not answer. They simply gathered the unconscious and crying children and marched them away to detention cells deep within the station. News traveled fast through the galaxy. Within hours, every human colony, every ship, and every outpost knew what had happened. On Earth, the message arrived in the middle of the night. President Nathan Cole was awakened by his chief of staff, who spoke only 4 words. They attacked our children. The president sat in silence for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but carried a weight that made his staff step back in fear. Wake everyone. Contact every fleet commander. And find Admiral Bennett. His children were on that station. Across the galaxy, aliens who had studied humanity began to feel something they had never experienced before. It was a cold sensation in their hearts, a warning from deep within their instincts. The humans had always seemed peaceful, even gentle. They traded fairly. They explored with curiosity rather than conquest. Many species had begun to think of them as harmless. Those species were about to learn how terribly wrong they had been. The great chamber of the United Earth Parliament had never been so quiet. Over 3,000 representatives sat in their seats, their faces pale and their hands trembling. On the massive screens that lined the walls, footage played on repeat. It showed Varus soldiers firing on human children. It showed small bodies falling to the ground. It showed little Emma Bennett being carried away like a piece of cargo. President Nathan Cole stood at the central podium. He was a man of 60 years, with silver hair and eyes that had seen many crises. But nothing in his long career had prepared him for this moment. He gripped the edges of the podium so tightly that his knuckles turned white. What you are seeing he said slowly, is not an act of war. It is something worse. It is an attack on innocence itself. 37 children went to Vega Station to learn about peace. 17 of them were injured by weapons designed for criminals. 3 of them, including the 9-year-old daughter of Admiral Christopher Bennett, remain in critical condition. A sound rose from the assembly. It was not shouting or crying. It was something lower and more frightening. It was the sound of 3,000 people breathing together, their anger building like pressure in a sealed container. The president continued. The Galactic Council has refused to return our children. They have refused to allow our medical teams access to the station. They have refused to arrest those responsible. In the history of our species, we have faced many challenges. We have survived ice ages and plagues and wars among ourselves. But we have never faced a moment like this one. The galaxy has harmed our children and told us to accept it. He paused and looked directly into the cameras that broadcast his words to every human in existence. We will not accept it. The chamber erupted. Not in chaos, but in unified determination. Representatives rose to their feet and spoke with one voice. They demanded action. They demanded justice. They demanded that the galaxy learn what happened when humanity was pushed too far. In a private room behind the chamber, Admiral Christopher Bennett sat alone. His uniform was wrinkled because he had not changed clothes in 2 days. His eyes were red from tears he had shed in private. His hands would not stop shaking. The door opened and Fleet Admiral Samantha Torres entered. She was a woman of 50 years, with dark skin and close-cropped gray hair. Her face was carved from stone, but her eyes showed deep sympathy. "Christopher," she said softly, "you should not be here. You should be with your wife." The Admiral shook his head. "My wife is on her way to Vega Station, aboard a civilian transport. She believes she can negotiate for our children's release. I know she will fail. The Varath do not want to negotiate. They want to use our children as weapons against us." Samantha sat down across from him. "The president has asked me to lead the response. I accepted on one condition. I want you to know that your children will be my first priority. Not politics, not territory, not revenge. Your children." Christopher finally looked up. His eyes met hers, and she saw the war happening inside him. He was a father who wanted to tear the galaxy apart with his bare hands. He was also a military leader who knew that emotion could not guide their response. "What are you planning?" he asked. Samantha leaned forward. "Something the Council will never expect. They think they understand humans. They have studied our history and seen our wars. They believe we will attack in anger and make mistakes. They are wrong. We are going to be patient. We are going to be precise. And when we finally move, they will realize that they never understood us at all." Across the galaxy, aboard Vega Station, the children huddled together in a detention block. The cells were designed for adult criminals, with hard metal beds and harsh lighting that never turned off. The youngest children cried for their parents. The older ones tried to comfort them, but fear made their voices shake. Lucas Bennett had taken charge without anyone asking him to. His back still burned from the neural disruptor that had struck him, but he ignored the pain. He gathered the children into groups and organized simple activities to keep them calm. He led them in songs they knew from school. He told stories about brave explorers and happy endings. Dr. Catherine Palmer was held in a separate cell, but she could hear the children through the walls. She pressed her ear against the cold metal and listened to Lucas leading the others in a song about sunshine. Tears ran down her face, but she smiled through them. Even in this terrible place, the children found ways to hope. A Varath guard approached her cell and looked at her with contempt. "Your government has been given our demands. They will surrender 3 colony systems and accept permanent trade restrictions. When they comply, The children will be released. Catherine stood and faced him through the bars. You do not know what you have done. You think you hold power over us because you hold our children, but you have only guaranteed your own destruction. The guard laughed. Humans are weak. You talk about peace and cooperation. You build schools instead of weapons. What can you possibly do against the combined might of the Galactic Council? Catherine's expression did not change. You will find out. And when you do, you will wish you had listened to every warning we ever gave you. On Earth, the diplomatic response began. Ambassador Nicole Reyes traveled to the Galactic Council headquarters on a distant world called Centrum. She was a small woman with sharp features and eyes that missed nothing. She had spent 30 years building relationships with alien species. Now she would use every connection she had made. The council chamber was enormous, designed to hold representatives from over 50 species. Nicole walked to the human platform and stood before the assembled aliens. Some looked at her with sympathy. Most looked at her with indifference or hostility. I come before this council with a simple request, she said. Her voice was calm and professional. Release our children. Apologize for the attack. Arrest those responsible. If you do these things, there will be peace between humanity and the galaxy. Councillor Tharkith rose from the Varith platform. His reptilian face twisted into what might have been a smile. The human children are in protective custody. They will be released when Earth accepts responsibility for the pathogen they carried to Vega Station. There was no pathogen, Nicole replied. Your own medical scans confirmed this. You attacked innocent children to gain political leverage. The galaxy knows the truth. The council voted. 12 species sided with the Vorith. 3 species, including the Eldari and the Thesan, voted in humanity's favor. The motion to release the children was defeated. Nicole closed her folder slowly. She looked around the chamber at each representative who had voted against humanity. She memorized their faces. Then she stood and spoke words that would change the course of galactic history. You were warned about this line. You crossed it anyway. What comes next is not our preference. It is your consequence. She walked out of the chamber without looking back. Within 6 hours, every human diplomat in the galaxy began returning to Earth. Trade agreements were suspended. Scientific partnerships were canceled. Human ships turned around and headed home. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. Humanity was withdrawing from everything. The species that had spread so quickly across the stars was pulling back behind its own borders. Some council members celebrated. They believed humanity was retreating in defeat. They could not have been more wrong. 3 weeks passed in silence. The galaxy watched and waited for humanity to do something, but nothing happened. Human ships did not appear in alien space. Human voices did not speak on communication channels. It was as if an entire species had simply vanished behind an invisible wall. Trade stations that had once bustled with human merchants now stood half-empty. Scientific outposts that had benefited from human researchers fell behind on their projects. Alien species who had grown accustomed to human goods and services suddenly found themselves struggling to replace what they had lost. The Galactic Council held emergency meetings to discuss the situation. Some representatives demanded that humanity be forced to resume normal relations. Others worried about what the silence might mean. A few wise voices urged the council to release the children before it was too late. Counselor Tharkith dismissed all concerns. The humans are sulking like children themselves. They will return when they realize they need the galaxy more than the galaxy needs them. Our strategy is working perfectly. But behind human borders, something very different was happening. Fleet Admiral Samantha Torres stood in the command center of Earth's largest military installation. Dozens of screens surrounded her, each showing a different fleet moving into position. Ships that the galaxy had never seen were emerging from hidden shipyards. Weapons that had been developed in secret were being loaded onto vessels designed for one purpose only. General Ryan Mitchell stood beside her, reviewing ground force deployments. He was a large man with a scarred face and hands that had seen decades of combat. "All Marine divisions are ready," he reported. "Extraction teams have been training around the clock. They can breach any known station design in under 4 minutes." Director Megan Holloway of Intelligence Services added her report. "We have assets inside Vega Station. They have confirmed the location of all 37 children. Medical status reports indicate that most are stable, but 3 remain in serious condition from the initial attack." Samantha nodded slowly. "And our friends among the Eldari?" "Ready to assist. Ambassador Sarath has provided detailed blueprints of the station's security systems. He has also agreed to delay any council response to our actions by at least 12 hours. The Admiral turned to face her commanders. Her expression was calm, but her eyes burned with cold fire. "For 3 weeks, the galaxy has wondered what we are doing. They think we are hiding. They think we are afraid. They are about to learn the truth." She pressed a button on her console, and the screens changed to show a unified deployment plan. 7 massive fleets were positioned at strategic points around Varth territory. Each fleet contained over 400 warships, from nimble fighters to enormous battlecruisers that stretched for kilometers. "Operation Homecoming begins in 6 hours," she announced. "Our objective is simple. We will recover our children. We will demonstrate to the galaxy that there are consequences for harming them. And we will do this with precision that they have never witnessed before, on a distant world called Desert Prime." Ambassador Sarath of the Eldari met secretly with representatives from species who supported humanity in the council vote. They gathered in a private chamber far from prying eyes. "I must warn you," Sarath said, his blue face grave. "I have communicated with my contacts on Earth. What humanity is planning goes beyond anything we anticipated. They have been hiding their true military strength for decades. What we have seen of their fleet represents perhaps 1/10 of their actual capability." A Thesan diplomat made a sound of disbelief. "That is impossible. Our intelligence services have monitored human space for years. We would have detected such a buildup." Sarath shook his head. "The humans are masters of deception when they choose to be. They showed us only what they wanted us to see. They appeared peaceful because they wished to be peaceful. But they were always prepared for a moment like this one." "What should we do?" asked another representative. "Nothing," Sarath replied. "Stay out of their way. When this is over, be ready to help rebuild relations. But do not interfere with what is coming." The Varth made their choice. Now they must face the consequences. Back on Vega Station, the children had lost track of time. The lights in their cells never changed, and no windows showed them the stars outside. Lucas Bennett continued to lead the others through each day, but exhaustion was wearing him down. His voice grew hoarse from telling stories. His eyes grew heavy from staying awake to comfort those who cried in the night. His sister, Emma, had woken from her critical state 3 days after the attack. She was weak and confused, but she was alive. Lucas held her hand whenever the guards allowed them to be together. He promised her that help was coming, even though he did not know if it was true. Dr. Catherine Palmer had been moved to solitary confinement after she refused to sign a statement blaming Earth for the incident. She spent her hours in darkness, praying for rescue and fearing that it might never come. On the 22nd day of humanity's silence, everything changed. The Varth Early Warning Network detected the first ships emerging from hyperspace at the edge of their territory. Officers initially assumed it was a small patrol, perhaps a lost merchant vessel. Then more ships appeared, and more. Within minutes. Over 3,000 human warships had materialized at 7 different locations across Vara space. They formed perfect geometric patterns, their weapons powered but silent, their communications channels open but quiet. The Varath military scrambled to respond. Ships launched from every base. Defense platforms activated their weapons. Commanders shouted orders and demanded explanations. Then a single message broadcast across every frequency in the galaxy. It came from Fleet Admiral Samantha Torres, and it was addressed to everyone who could hear. This message is for the Galactic Council and for every species that voted to keep our children prisoner. You have held 37 human children for 22 days. You have injured them. You have frightened them. You have refused every diplomatic attempt to secure their release. She paused, and in that pause, the galaxy held its breath. You have 6 hours to deliver our children to the neutral coordinates we are now transmitting. They must be unharmed. Every single one must be returned. There will be no negotiation. There will be no extension. There will be no second chance. If our children are not delivered within 6 hours, we will come and take them ourselves. And we will not be gentle. The message ended. The human fleet remained motionless, waiting. Across the galaxy, alien species stared at their screens in shock. The humans they had dismissed as peaceful traders and naive explorers had just revealed themselves to be something else entirely. The fleet that hung in Vora space was larger than most species could deploy in a full mobilization. And it had appeared without any warning, without any detection, without any chance to prepare. For the first time in galactic history, the Varath knew fear. The clock began counting down. 6 hours. The Varath military had prepared for war. They had assembled every ship they could spare, armed every station with maximum firepower, and positioned their forces to defend against a direct assault on their homeworld. They expected the humans to attack with anger and rage. They expected chaos and destruction. What they received was something far more terrifying. Precision. The human fleet divided into hundreds of smaller groups. Each group had a specific target. Military shipyards, weapons factories, defense platforms, communication arrays. The attacks came simultaneously, synchronized across light years of space with timing that should have been impossible. The Varath fought back, but they could not keep up. Every time they moved to defend one location, 3 others fell. Human ships appeared from nowhere, struck their targets with devastating accuracy, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Admiral Torres watched the operation from her command bridge. Her officers reported success after success, their voices professional and calm. There was no celebration in the room. This was not a victory to enjoy. It was a lesson to teach. Status on civilian areas? She asked. All civilian population centers remain untouched, her tactical officer replied. We are avoiding any targets within 50 kilometers of non-military sites. Casualty estimates among Varath military personnel are being kept to minimum required for mission completion. Torres nodded. Continue. We are not here to destroy them. We are here to remove their ability to threaten anyone ever again. The campaign lasted 72 hours. When it ended, the Varath Empire existed only within their home system. Every military installation beyond their own planet had been reduced to debris. Every warship outside their atmosphere had been disabled or destroyed. Every weapon platform that could threaten other species had been eliminated. The human fleet withdrew to neutral space and waited. On Vega Station, Counselor Tharkith watched reports of the destruction with growing horror. Everything he had worked for was gone. The military strength that had made the Varath a major galactic power had evaporated in 3 days. And he knew exactly who was responsible. His own people turned against him within hours. Military commanders who had lost fleets, demanded his arrest. Politicians who had supported his plan now pretended they had opposed it from the beginning. Ordinary citizens screamed for justice, fearing that the humans might return if they did not comply with their demands. Tharketh was taken from his chambers in restraints. He was transported to neutral space and handed over to human custody, delivered by his own government as a sacrifice to end the violence. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The chamber that had been so confident in voting against humanity now trembled with fear. Representatives who had dismissed human concerns now begged for peace. Ambassador Nicole Reyes returned to the council floor. She walked to the human platform with slow, deliberate steps. Every alien in the chamber watched her with new eyes. They saw not a diplomat from a young species. They saw the voice of a civilization that had just demonstrated power beyond anything they had imagined. "Let me be clear about what has happened," Nicole said, her voice carrying through the silent chamber. "Humanity did not seek this conflict. We came to the galaxy with open hands. We offered trade and friendship and cooperation. We sent our children to learn about other cultures because we believed in peaceful coexistence." She paused and looked around the room. "You answered our friendship with violence against our children. You answered our diplomacy with political games. You answered our patience with cruelty. So now I will explain how things will work from this point forward." She activated a holographic display that showed a new document floating above the chamber floor. "This is an amendment to galactic law. It states that crimes against children of any species will be treated as crimes against species as a whole. Any government that harms children will face immediate response from the affected species, with full rights of proportional retaliation. This amendment will be added to the Galactic Code. You will vote for it. You will vote unanimously." A representative from the Karathi species raised a hand. "And if we do not agree?" Nicole's expression did not change. "Then humanity will withdraw from all galactic affairs permanently. We will close our borders to all species who oppose this amendment. We will develop our civilization alone, building strength that you cannot imagine. And when the next crisis threatens the galaxy, when the next enemy appears at your borders, you will face it without us." The vote was unanimous. 2 weeks later, a ceremony took place on Earth. The 37 children who had been held on Vega Station gathered in a park near the Parliament building. They were surrounded by their families, by government officials, and by crowds of citizens who had come to welcome them home. Lucas and Emma Bennett stood with their father, Admiral Christopher Bennett. He had not worn his uniform today. He had come as a father, not as a military leader. His arms wrapped around both children, and he did not let go for a very long time. Reporters gathered at the edge of the park, waiting for a statement. When the Admiral finally turned to face them, his eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. "We are not a species that seeks conflict," he said. "We explore. We build. We reach for the stars with open hands. But our hands can close into fists when we must protect what we love. The galaxy has learned this lesson. We hope it never needs to be taught again." The crowd cheered. Children waved flags and threw flowers. For one perfect moment, humanity celebrated not a victory of war, but a victory of love far across the galaxy. Species who had watched these events unfold began to understand something important. Humanity was not weak because they sought peace. They sought peace because they were strong enough to enforce it. They chose cooperation because they knew they could survive without it. Ambassador Sareth of the Eldari sent a private message to his government. "We must strengthen our alliance with humanity, not because we fear them, but because we admire them. They showed restraint when they could have shown destruction. They protected their children without becoming monsters themselves. This is a species worth standing beside." Years would pass. The Varth would eventually be allowed to rebuild. under strict supervision and with new leadership that understood the consequences of aggression. Trade would resume. Diplomatic relations would heal. The galaxy would move forward, but no species would ever forget the lesson they learned in those 72 hours of human precision. There were lines that could not be crossed. There were beings too precious to threaten. And there was a species among the stars that would burn worlds to protect its young. On a quiet evening, many years later, an older Lucas Bennett stood on a balcony overlooking the city he now helped govern. His sister Emma joined him, no longer a frightened child but a diplomat herself, working to build the bridges that their generation had nearly seen destroyed. "Do you ever think about those weeks on Vega Station?" Emma asked. Lucas nodded slowly. "Every day, but not with fear anymore. I think about the people who came for us. I think about how the whole species came together to bring us home. And I remember what Dad said about our hands. Open to reach for the stars," Emma said, "but ready to close into fists when we must." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, the galaxy continued its endless dance of species and civilizations. And somewhere in that vast darkness, every alien who looked toward human space remembered the truth that 37 children had taught them. Some lines should never be crossed. Humanity would make sure of that. The countdown began the moment Admiral Torres finished speaking. 6 hours, 360 minutes, 21,600 seconds. Every human in the galaxy watched the clock. Every alien in the galaxy watched the fleet. On Vega Station, chaos erupted. Counselor Tharkith received emergency communications from the Varith homeworld. The military commanders demanded to know what they should do. Politicians shouted blame at each other. Fear spread through every corridor and every chamber. Tharkith tried to remain calm, but his scales had turned pale with stress. He had expected humanity to negotiate. He had expected them to beg and offer concessions. He had never imagined they would respond with such overwhelming force. "Contact the Galactic Council," he ordered. "Demand military assistance. The humans cannot be allowed to threaten us this way." His aide returned minutes later with devastating news. "The Council has convened an emergency session. No species has offered to assist us. Several representatives have already left the chamber. They say they want no part of what happens next." Tharkith slammed his fist against the wall. "Cowards! We stood together against the humans. Now they abandon us?" "The human fleet is too large," his aide replied quietly. "No one wants to provoke them further. Several species have sent private messages urging us to release the children immediately." In the detention block, the children knew nothing of what was happening above them. Lucas Bennett sat with his back against the cold wall, Emma sleeping with her head in his lap. The other children had finally fallen into exhausted rest. Only Lucas remained awake, staring at the ceiling and wondering if anyone was coming to save them. Dr. Catherine Palmer sat in her dark cell and listened to the distant sounds of alarms. Something was happening. She did not know what, but she felt hope stirring in her chest for the first time in weeks. 5 hours remained on the countdown. When the extraction team launched from the human carrier vessel Resolute Dawn, Lieutenant Commander Jason Perry led the 12-person squad. They traveled in a stealth shuttle that was invisible to every known detection system. Perry was a man of 35 years, with quiet eyes and steady hands. He had served in special operations for over a decade. He had rescued hostages from pirates and criminals across human space. But he had never faced a mission like this one. "Listen carefully," he told his team as they approached the station. "Our targets are 37 children and 1 adult coordinator. The children may be injured or traumatized. They will be frightened. Our job is to get them out safely and quietly. We do not engage unless we have no other choice. One of his soldiers spoke up. And if someone gets in our way? Perry's expression did not change. Then they stopped being a problem. But we prioritize the mission. The children come first. Everything else is secondary. The shuttle docked at an abandoned maintenance port on the far side of the station. Eldari intelligence had provided the access codes, and the door opened without alarm. The team moved through dark corridors, avoiding patrols and security. Cameras with practiced efficiency, 4 hours and 20 minutes, remained when they reached the detention level. Perry pressed his back against the wall and studied the security layout. Through his tactical display, 6 guards stood between his team and the children. 2 were posted at the main entrance. 4 patrolled the interior corridors. "Quiet approach," he ordered. "Non-lethal first. But if any guard reaches for a weapon, you put them down permanently." His team moved like shadows. The first 2 guards fell without making a sound, struck by neural darts that dropped them instantly. The interior patrol was more difficult. 1 guard spotted movement and raised his weapon. He never completed the motion. A single shot from Perry's sidearm ensured he would never threaten anyone again. 3 hours and 52 minutes remained when Perry reached the cell block controls. He input the override codes and the doors slid open. Lucas Bennett heard the sound and jumped to his feet, placing himself between the door and his sister. He expected Varus soldiers coming to hurt them again. Instead, he saw humans in tactical gear, their faces hidden behind helmets, but their voices speaking in familiar accents. "Lucas Bennett?" Perry asked, removing his helmet so the boy could see his face. "I'm Commander Jason Perry. We're here to take you home." For a moment, Lucas could not speak. 3 weeks of fear and responsibility broke inside him like a dam releasing water. Tears streamed down his face as he nodded. "My sister," he managed to say. "She was hurt badly. She needs a doctor." Perry knelt beside Emma, who was waking up with confused eyes. He smiled at her gently. "Hello, Emma. I'm a friend of your father. He sent me to bring you home. Can you walk?" Emma looked at Lucas, who nodded encouragement. "I think so," she whispered. The team gathered all 37 children and moved them toward the extraction point. Some of the youngest had to be carried. Some of the older ones helped support those who were weak. Dr. Catherine Palmer walked among them, counting heads and making sure no one was left behind. 3 hours and 18 minutes remained when they reached the shuttle dock on Vega Station's command deck. Tharkith finally received word that the council had voted to release the children. He felt a moment of relief before his security chief delivered another report. "Counselor, we have detected movement in the detention level. The prisoners are gone." Tharkith stared at him. "What do you mean gone?" "Someone extracted them. Our guards were neutralized. The cells are empty." For a long moment, Tharkith could not process what he was hearing. The humans had taken their children back. They had infiltrated his station, bypassed his security, and stolen away their people without triggering a single alarm. "The human fleet," he said slowly. "Have they attacked?" "No, Counselor. They have not moved. They have not fired. They are simply waiting." Tharkith understood then that the fleet had never been the real threat. It was a distraction, a show of force to keep everyone looking outward while the true operation happened. Within 2 hours and 47 minutes remained on the countdown when the children arrived safely aboard the human medical ship Gentle Dawn, Navy. Doctors rushed to examine each child. Emma Bennett was taken immediately to intensive care, where human technology began healing the damage done by Vorath weapons. Lucas stood in the corridor outside his sister's treatment room. He watched through a window as doctors worked to save her. A hand touched his shoulder, and he turned to find Commander Perry standing beside him. "You did well," Perry said quietly. "You kept those children calm and organized for 3 weeks. You showed courage that would honor any soldier." Lucas shook his head. "I was scared the whole time. I just tried not to show it." Perry smiled slightly. "That's exactly what courage is. Being scared and doing what needs to be done anyway. Your father will be very proud of you." On the bridge of the flagship Unconquered, Admiral Torres received confirmation that all children were safe. She allowed herself one moment of relief before turning her attention to what came next. "Transmit the following to all frequencies," she ordered. "Our children are safe. The 6-hour deadline expired 18 minutes ago. We acknowledge that the Council voted for release during the countdown period. However, the vote came 3 hours and 47 minutes after our ultimatum began. We stated there would be consequences. We do not make empty promises." The galaxy held its breath once more. The human fleet began to move.